So the new album, of course, Heaven Comes Down, is going to be dropping on October 27th. Maybe talk to us about how highly anticipated this has been, man. The first studio record since 2012. I wonder, did making this record sort of give you extra time to
Yep.
sit with that material?
Well, that was, I guess, a blessing, but we didn't plan on that. But there's a lot of things happened in this band in the last 5 years. So on the internet, my my right arm got paralyzed,
Yeah.
so I couldn't play guitar anymore. So I couldn't compose. That sucked. And then John Levin, he has surgery on his left side. He was having his fingers go to sleep. There was some kind of weird thing going on. And then frickin' Chris McCarville, he's a big fan of doing BMX, like bicycling.
Hmm.
And he was out on the trails one day and he took a really big fall and shattered his humerus bone like in 7 places. That really sucks. So he was out of commission for, a year. So, we all had our problems. We couldn't play, we couldn't tour, and we couldn't finish the record. So, I mean, when you can't play guitar, how am I going to finish the songs?
It's a bit of a challenge, right?
That, yeah, when you can't play. And I waited and waited, going to the gym 3 days a week and physical therapy. But, here's my left hand's normal. Here's
Yeah.
my right hand.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
fucked.
So that's
I mean,
definitely a challenge.
It's over. The whole arm is paralyzed. I can hold a cup. That's about it. So, that was depressing, after surgery. And I thought, well, and they kept saying, give it a year, give it a year, give it a year. And it's been 3 years. So it didn't come back. So that was a bummer, and then Chris and then John. And it's like, damn, we just had one disaster after the other. So we couldn't, continue to write and record. But
Yeah.
we got it done, so it's been a long time. I wasn't sure if we'd make another record. We didn't have a record deal at the time. And then COVID hit, and
Right.
that screwed up everything. COVID hit, and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And that, that put a big challenge for us.
Of course.
So, but we're old now. I just got home last night. We were in
Really?
Massachusetts. Yep. I was in Massachusetts. Here's my spine.
Wow. Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
13 titanium screws.
That is
Yeah,
insane, man.
that is pretty, yeah, it hurts. I can
Yeah.
barely do my neck left and right, couple inches. So the doctor screwed up, and that happened. And then I didn't want to like change members or get another member in the band. And then I get a call from Chris, the bass player, and he's like, dude, I wiped out on my bicycle and my whole his arm was shattered.
Yeah.
And they wanted to cut off his arm.
Holy
And
shit.
he's like, no way. So he said, I ain't gonna do it. And he finally found somebody. That's Chris's arm.
Whoa. Whoa. So those are all like metal pieces.
Those are titanium screws.
That is unreal.
Yeah, it sucks. So he's got titanium screws and a steel plate, and that's staying forever.
Wow. You guys are
So
going to have the whole band collection of x-rays here in a minute.
yeah, I know. I said, man, we should have put these pictures on the album Broken Bones.
There you go. Coming full circle. I mean, Don, people a lot of the times when things like this happen, the common response is, maybe there's a silver lining, maybe there's some sort of blessing in disguise. Have you reached that point with this, or do you just feel like I just want to get back to normal and just be done with this?
Well, I did, from the day I had surgery. I mean, I made a joke when I was going to the operating room. I told the surgeon, just do me two favors. Don't kill me and don't paralyze me. So I got half. I'm
Wow.
paralyzed. My whole arm is, it took me a year just to be able to go like this, 1 year.
No
And I
kidding.
couldn't, and my leg partially. So, I was in a walker and in a cane, and I still have a cane. I don't try to use it too much, but that just took the wind out of the band's sail. I mean, and then John was recuperating. Chris is still in therapy. He goes to therapy, physical therapy. So, what could we do? He couldn't play bass. John couldn't play guitar. Even now, when we go on tour, we we have bags of ice we put on our backs and our shoulders, and we all got hurt.
That's real soldiers though, man. I mean, you guys are still out there and doing it.
Yep.
What exactly makes you have that drive still? Did you ever consider not going back?
No, well, it's the love of music. I mean, it's not about money or glory. I already had my glory, and I still have it. And I think all of us are pretty financially set. I mean, John, the guitar player, he's been in the band over 20 years. He's an attorney also. So he has his law practice, and that keeps him busy. But he says, I hate being a lawyer. I'd rather be on stage, playing my guitar. And Chris, he has a company. And so, but, we've always said, when we get tired of playing, it's just too much, then we'll call it a day. Or like the old saying is, you throw a party and nobody shows up.
Right.
But, it's all like the glory days. We had a tour bus, you're playing every night. And nowadays we do a couple shows a week. But, it's like my saying is, it's 22 hours of hell for 2 hours of glory.
Mm.
Sitting in Dallas, I'm in New Mexico, pretty hard to get out of here and go anywhere. And you got to fly to Dallas, and you got a couple hour layover, and you got a 4 hour, flight to Massachusetts. And it's a lot of work, we get burned out. I'm not 25 anymore.
Yeah, definitely. But it's the love of that music that keeps you going. So I mean, obviously that's going to be reflected on this new record.
Absolutely.
How much of this was written sort of in the past, let's say recently, maybe past 6 months, and how much of this was written through sort of the hiatus, I wonder?
Mostly the hiatus.
Okay.
I mean, the truth is, we finished this record a year ago,
Okay.
and the record company just said, we're going to hold it back. And I said, well, then why are you rushing me? We finished the record over a year ago. And obviously, when COVID hit, you couldn't even tour because they had these limits. You could only play for a couple hundred people. It was a big epidemic. So everybody just went home, started writing, and dealing with their other, companies and projects and stuff. And I just devoted myself to going to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to try to get the rest of my body, my chest and my legs and my arms, to compensate for my paralyzed arm. So that's taken me a couple years. But thank God, I'd written so many songs in the last 8 years before I had surgery. We had a lot of material, and John wrote a lot of songs too. So, and then I write the lyrics. So we wrote 25 songs, narrowed it down to 14. And the record company decided to take 4 off the record, which I wish they wouldn't have, because they were really good songs.
Hmm.
But since we're coming out on vinyl, they didn't want the CD to have 14 songs and only 10 on the record. It would compete with the CD, and people would buy the CD because you get more songs.
Right.
So they pulled 4 off, which I regret, because those are the 4 songs that I was playing guitar on. But, I've had to come to terms with it. You go through depression, anger, and I live on my estate. I got 25 acres to take care of, thousands of trees. I can't hold my chainsaw anymore. That's kind of frustrating.
Has it been harder to adapt to your regular life after this surgery, or to your performance life, so to speak?
My performance life is fine. I'm just singing, But my personal life, I mean, it took a big hit. I mean, the first year I couldn't even wash dishes. I couldn't make my bed. I couldn't put my clothes on. I'm right-handed, you
Right.
know, only does this. So unfortunately, my better half, she'd have to dress me and put my socks on and my shoes and my shirt. And I couldn't even put a t-shirt on. I just couldn't do it.
It's
You know, I
terrible.
couldn't, I couldn't lift my hand up to put the shirt on. And then the poor guys, the band, they had to babysit me when I go on tour. I wear a button shirt or my leathers, and I'd have to call Chris or John. Hey, can you guys come to my room and button up my pants and button up my shirt and help me get my boots on? You should try it sometime. Try to put a boot on with one hand. It's impossible.
Seriously, this is just stuff. I mean, it's things that we don't even think of though, because we're so used to just using both hands. And obviously, as someone who's used them his whole life, that must have been like a huge adjustment, especially your dominant hand.
Huge, huge. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, like the first couple months, I'd be sitting on the toilet. Try it sometime. Try to push yourself off the toilet with one hand. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So it was pretty rough the first year. And I just kept hoping that my arm would come back, the nerves would grow back. But, it didn't. So it changed my life. And then especially since I live on, on a mountain, very secluded with 25 acres of land, you got to trim the trees and pull the weeds. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I tried to be a lefty, and I do my best, but it's not easy. My brain says right hand. John's lucky. John's ambidextrous. He's
Oh, wow.
actually left-handed. He writes with his left hand, does all his legal stuff left hand, but he plays guitar right hand. Very strange.
That's very unique, right? I mean, there's not a lot of ambidextrous players. I know there's some, but
No, like Jimi Hendrix,
right.
he played his guitar upside down, left-handed, but
Cobain, right, as well.
Cobain, left-handed, but John plays right-handed. So I don't know how he does it. I mean, I guess he's got that brain that works. So I was just getting better after a year. And then John had a surgery. We both had surgeries. And then Chris, you saw the MRI.
Yeah.
And he crashed and burned. So I just said, okay, guys, we're just going to stop.
Right.
And then COVID hit. 2 years of COVID.
Man, it's just one thing after another. So, I mean, it must feel really good to actually be back out there, not only doing the music, but, shows coming up, just wrapped as well. I mean, it must feel refreshing.
Yeah, I just got home last night.
Yeah.
So, we were in Massachusetts. We had about 6,000 people, and it was 70 degrees, and it was perfect weather. And, it's the rush, like I said, it's 22 hours of bullshit for that 2 hours of glory. You got John flying from LA. I'm coming from New Mexico. Got the band coming from Connecticut. They actually drove to Massachusetts, next state over. But yeah, it's, I don't know. It depends on your level of fame,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the 80s, we got to the point where we had a private jet.
Right.
We had handlers and makeup people and a wardrobe girl and I had my personal assistant and, but those days are gone. Unless you're Metallica, you don't have that, I can't fly 8 people on a plane to a show for a one-off, it's cost a fortune. But I'm just grateful that we're, still have fans. I mean, we play with a lot of bands that warm up for us that had hits in the 80s, maybe 1 or 2, but, we always usually headline. But we're not on that level of Metallica. They're probably the biggest band in the world now. They can play anywhere they want and sell, 20,000, 30,000 tickets.
Yeah.
And, and how it's kind of ironic that when we did Monster Rock, they opened for us.
Right.
They went on before us. So we were at the peak. And I'm just happy that you don't know what's going to happen 40 years later if the fans don't care. Dokken, that was an 80s band. I hate that stigma of a hair band. We were never a hair band.
Right.
Anybody's ever heard Dokken record, we had our heavy side like Kiss of Death, Lightning Strikes Again, Tooth and Nail, Heaven Comes Down, to the dark side. Then we had our more commercial hits, you know. So we kind of rode the line. You know, some bands like Poison were just pop. It was all about glam, but we weren't like that. You know, we were different. We were all, you know, pretty heavy. And so here I am, you know, talking to you at 2023, and just 24 hours ago, I had 7,000 people singing every song. So
See, that's insane. It's incredible. And I mean, it's something that you should definitely be very grateful and happy about. And, you know, the fans love you, man. And that's actually a question I got here from one of your fans as well. Jason was just curious, to your point, what it was like to be the first sort of alternative choice for hair and glam metal fans. Because again, you guys were sort of thrown into that world by people who maybe didn't really know your music, but when you got into it, you guys were not like that. And you were like an alternative choice, you know?
We got that because, you know, the record company always wants to put out the most commercial song on MTV. So we had our In My Dreams, Just Got Lucky, The Hunter, It's Not Love, Alone Again. So people that just watched MTV thought, oh, they're just like a big hair band and they're more commercial. They obviously didn't buy the record and listen to all the deeper tracks, you know, the heavy songs on the double bass and heavy stuff, you know. So, you know, that's the way it was, you know. But then you fast forward. And, you know, of course, 91, I'd say to 99 was the height of the grunge era. You know, and all the bands from the 80s took a hit. Yeah. Except for maybe Motley Crue. They, you know, stopped playing for years and did their reunion tour and their farewell tour. But they were like, you know, Makeup and all the stuff. They were more like, and they had songs like, you know, Girls, Girls, Girls. And you had songs like Poison with, you know, all those pop songs. Yeah. But we weren't like that. I mean, people always ask me, oh, did you tour with Poison and this band and that band? I said, no. You look at our history, we toured with AC/DC, Judas Priest, Van Halen, Scorpions. You know, we toured with all the hard rock bands because we could ride the line. You know, we weren't a hair band. We had enough ballsy songs that we could tour Europe with AC/DC. Seriously. And I mean, people always responded to that too. Like I always saw the crossover in the heavier fans. They always mentioned Dokken. Yeah. Yeah. So it definitely had that big crossover. So, I mean, you know, maybe in terms of collaborating with some of those bands, we got this question here from Anthony. He was just curious in your involvement in the 1982 record Blackout, of course, by the Scorpions. Right. What exactly was your involvement in that? Some background vocals or just vocals in general? Just backgrounds. Okay. Well, I was really young. You know, in 82, I was in my 20s. And I hadn't done a world tour. And I hadn't, you know, had a record out. I hadn't done 500 shows. And my voice was, I'd say, a virgin. Okay. And, you know, in those early days, you hear the Dokken albums, I was singing much higher. I mean, I was an alto. I could hit soprano notes. So, you know, Dieter Dierks was the producer of the Scorpions. And it just, you know, it's just dumb luck. You know, we were playing the Whiskey and Dieter Dierks came to the Whiskey and saw my band. And he says, Don, I don't like your band. I said, oh, sorry about that. He had no record deal. But he said, but I like your voice. And he goes, but I noticed that you sing with a lot of vibrato. You know, that's why I sing naturally. So does Klaus Meine. So, and Klaus had surgery during that record, and they'd been working on it for like 2 years, and they wanted to finish the record, and it was almost done. And he said, do you want to come to Germany and just do all the high stuff? Give Me All I Need, No One Like You, Dynamite, you know, all those super high vocals on the harmonies. I just did those. That's all I did because I was green, you know, and I could do it. And then he'd say, can you sing higher? And I'm like, oh man, don't ask me to do that. You're going to kill me. You know, I could do it. How high can you sing, right? Like back then I could hit B flats above A, which was, you know, Rob Halford screams, you know, I could do that. So, I just went to Germany and did some background vocals on the Scorpions album. And then Dieter said, they call the Studio B, the small one. And he let me use it for a week to do some demos. And I just wrote Breaking the Chains and a couple other songs. And the manager of Accept was in there at the same time. They were doing Russian roulette. And their manager, Gabby Hauke, took my cassette to Hamburg to Carrera Records and played it for the president. And he said, I want to sign him.
Wow.
And I went, holy shit. So she came back, handed me a plane ticket, and said, he'll give you 10,000 marks. And I said, how much is that in dollars?
Right.
It was like $8,500. And, we were getting $1 million deals later on. But I said, $8,500? I had $20 left on me. I said, I'll do it.
At the time, right? Hell
yeah. And Annie's going to pay for the record. I said, okay. And he goes, but you only got 3 weeks. You got to knock it out. So, what people don't know, the younger fans, when Breaking the Chains originally came out, it was just a picture of me on the cover, chained up, and it said Don Dokken, not Dokken, Don Dokken, because it was a solo record. I had no band.
Right.
Just me, and then I hired George and Mick to come to Germany to do the rhythm tracks. And I called them up in LA. I knew them from the Hollywood scene. They were in a band called The Boys. And I said, hey, you guys want to come to Germany? And, we got a hotel and we can make a record. And their band had kind of fallen apart. And they said, yeah, okay. So I just hired George and Mick just as session cats.
Okay.
They just came over, cut their tracks, went home. But then the record took off, in Europe. And so when I came back to LA, we still didn't have a record deal. Took about a year. And then I finally got a record deal in Elektra. And that's when Mick and George wanted to join the band. And then, but Juan Crucier had been the bass player. He left to go with Rat. And that's when we went out bar hopping and we found Jeff Pilson in a bar playing Little Red Corvette.
Oh, wow.
So that's the history of it. And so I said, okay, I'll drop the name Don and we'll just call it, even though it had always been Dokken since 77, I did 2 tours of Europe as Dokken. And I said, we'll just take my surname off and we'll call it Dokken. And the rest is history.
There you go. I mean, when you think back to those times of a young Don, I mean, do you still relate to those times in any way? Is that a place you go often in your mind, or is it something that sort of you've experienced and now it's just in your past?
Well, it's my past. I mean, people ask me all the time about, there were rumors that I was going to replace Klaus because he lost his voice and I'd be the new singer. And I thought, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. It was just one magazine. Some newspaper came in the studio when Scorpions was recording and they saw me singing.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, they're getting a new singer.
Bit of a reach.
And I remember talking to Klaus one day, and because he didn't talk to me much and he didn't speak really good English.
Right.
And I said to Klaus, I said, I just want you to know, even if because if his voice was gone, he had like these things, electrodes, and he has serious problems. And I said to Klaus, even if somebody had asked me to join the Scorpions, I would have said no.
Really?
I just want you to know, Klaus, I'm a huge Scorpions fan since Fly the Rainbow, when Uli was in the band, Tokyo Tapes. And I said, even if they asked me, even though it'd be a great honor to be in a Scorpion, I told Klaus I would have said no. I said, because you are the voice of the Scorpions.
That's huge.
The way you sing, it's got that heavy vibrato. I mean, I go, you're the voice of Scorpions. I said, I just want to tell you that. I'm just here to help out. That's all. And then the rumors flew around, but I would have never joined the Scorpions even if they asked me, because Klaus is the sound of the Scorpions. And we've all now been friends for over 45 years. And when they were looking for a new drummer, I said, you should try Mikkey Dee. Because he had been in my band from Up from the Ashes. He had been in King Diamond, then he joined my band, then he went on to Motorhead 15 years, then Lemmy passed. And I said, you got to try out Mikkey Dee, man. But I think in the beginning, they just thought he was like a speed metal drummer. So it was
Right.
Motorhead.
For sure.
And I said, dude, trust me. Go listen to my album, Up From the Ashes. That's Mikkey. He's a
Exactly.
solid rock drummer. He's killer. He's on fire on stage. I said, he is not just Motorhead. He's a full-blown rock drummer. And they auditioned him, and now he's been in the Scorpions for 7 years. So
He's
we're
so
all like
versatile
one big
too.
family.
Yeah, it is like a big family, right? And I mean, a guy like Mikkey Dee, so versatile. And I mean, he's been on this show as well. He speaks very highly of his time, playing with you.
We had fun.
Yeah. What are your sort of recollections of that time with Mickey in that era in the group?
Well, Mickey was living in Sweden, and John Norm was Norwegian, and Peter Balta came from Germany, and I brought Big Billy White in from Austin. So I just flew them all out to LA, and I rented a big house, and they all lived together 2 blocks from me. And we would just rehearse and started writing the album. But it was fun because we'd all go out and party and hit the club scene and go to the Rainbow. And it was fun times, It was before the era of, cocaine, fentanyl, 18-year-olds with the AK-47 killing children in grammar schools. I mean, the world was different then, man.
Yeah.
I can't even turn the effing news on now because, these son of a bitches, these right-wing crazy people, go kill children, with an automatic weapon. And every day there's 250 people die of fentanyl. In the 80s, it was just cocaine, drinking, partying, chasing chicks.
Yeah.
We were all single. None of us were married. So, we just had great times. And they'd come to my house and we'd party in the weekends and we'd jam and we'd go to rehearsal and just write songs. And it was great because I had a lot of input from Peter Baltus, great songwriter, and John and Billy. And, it was a band. We got along. We were like 4 guys in a band, 5. We were just best friends, which for me was refreshing because in Dokken, we were never friends. Everybody in Dokken, we didn't hang out. I didn't hang out with Jeff or Mick or George. Those guys were off with an ounce of cocaine doing their thing. And I was home writing songs. I never got into cocaine. I didn't get into that drug scene. And I have to tell you, well, it's already been documented so well in the Motley Crue, The Dirt, and all these documentaries about the Rainbow and the whiskey. Everybody was coked up out of their mind.
I can only imagine, right? I mean, did you feel like an outlier in that scene in any ways?
It was weird. I was like, they almost looked at me like, Don doesn't do drugs. What's wrong with him?
Right.
Like, dude, I tried it. In 76 or something. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It wasn't my thing. It wasn't my thing. And then in the 80s, I look at these guys doing coke. I said, I'm not sure that's coke.
Right.
Putting all this crap in it, speed. And, I mean, I remember I tried coke when I was like 21 and I could do a couple lines and I could go to sleep.
Wow.
There was always the joke about if you bought cocaine in the 80s on the strip, it probably came from Carlos Escobar.
There you go.
So it was the real deal. Real cocaine, pure. Yeah. And then you see these guys doing coke and they're sweating and they're antsy and they're all nervous. I go, I don't think that's coke, man. So they were starting to cut it with speed and meth and, it wasn't the real deal anymore. But that was the 80s, I mean, there's millions of famous stories that I go in the Rainbow and people are chopping lines on the table. Man. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? But I was more of a wine guy,
How lucky are you, though?
Oh, God, I'd be dead. I have an addictive personality. I'd be dead,
Yeah.
I just didn't like it. Like I said, I was addicted. I would rather stay home and just play my guitar and write demos. I had a little 4-track cassette recorder. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to write songs. I wanted to make it. All I cared about was making it, you know. And the only time I lived in LA my whole life, but now I'm in New Mexico. But, like you say about Mikkey Dee, when he comes to LA, he's been on the road for like a year and a half, and he'd call me because my house was in Beverly Hills, like 10 minutes from the Rainbow.
Nice.
He'd say, Don, come on down, have a drink. And I go, come on, Mickey, come on down the Rainbow. So I go down and hang out with him. That's the only time I went to the Rainbow.
He was persuasive.
Well, I tell him there's only one rule, because you'd have all his Swedish friends with him, and they're all going, I go, guys, there's only one rule. When I'm here, speak English.
Yeah, this is an English zone.
I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about, because Mickey and I have been great friends, for forever. So the only time I go to the Rainbow is when Mickey's in town, Or, of course, Lemmy, I'd go down and hang out with Lemmy. And Lemmy was there every night, 7 days a week. So, and then when he passed away, it was really awesome that they made a Lemmy room outside the Rainbow, and a 6-foot statue of him, and it's the Lemmy room, and all the chairs have the Motorhead logo on them, and it's pretty cool.
That's a touching tribute, man. And I mean, definitely like that. Those were his stomping grounds, right? So it has to be there.
He didn't drive, he didn't drive.
Right.
He lived like 2 blocks away. He'd just walk up. And I could always find him. They said, oh, he's playing poker. I said, no, in the 80s, he was playing Pac-Man.
Pac-Man.
And he always had the highest score on Pac-Man. It was the only video game in the Rainbow. And it was off on the side in the bar in the corner. Wow. And Lemmy had the high score. And then they start putting those video poker games, and he switched over to that.
Right.
But I loved Lemmy. But it's funny about Lemmy, he was the first famous musician I ever met.
Really?
I met him in Hamburg, Germany. We were on our first tour in 79, and we're getting ready to play the Top 10 club where the Beatles used to play. And I went in there the night before we played to check out the club down the Reeperbahn, where all the hookers were. And I saw this guy sitting there with a hat on, and it looks like Lemmy Kilmister. So I walked over and, hey, my name's Don Dokken. I'm in a band. We're playing tomorrow night. And he said, are you buying? And I'm like, hell yeah, man. I want to hang out with Lemmy Kilmister. And we became like great friends after that. When he was in LA, I didn't have to be on the guest list. I could just go up to the door and say, can you just tell Lemmy that Don Dokken's here? And he'd just get me right in. And after the show, we'd go on his tour bus and just hang out, Man. He was a great guy. And, we always thought, because he was very open about it in his documentary, that he did speed, he did coke, he drank shitloads of Jack Daniels. And, who would have thought that he'd get a brain tumor and die,
Seriously, the fact that he outlived all of that, right? It's almost hard to believe, but it's very Lemmy, it's very like enigmatic, and it goes with his whole persona, right?
And he never lied about it.
Yeah.
In his documentary, he's like, here's my apartment. He could have bought a mansion. He could have built a big house. He was totally happy in his little apartment.
That's true.
In the Rainbow for 30 years.
Man.
And when I first met him, he was living in London, and he lived on what they call a longboat. These long, skinny boats on the Thames River. And he lived in this, he had like a boat he lived on. And I was like, then I understood when I got famous, when people walk up and they're all goo goo gaga.
Right.
When I saw Lemmy, I was like, oh my God, it's Lemmy,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say to him. I just felt like a groupie, It's Lemmy, and we became great friends. And then of course, Mickey joined Motorhead. So we have a long history between all those European bands, and like Saxon, I became friends with Biff, and and we were nobody. Dokken was like, we were just a little band being a support band. So anyway, that's the history of all that. We all just kind of became a family. But then I decided I'd had enough LA after 40 years, and I wanted to get away and live up in the mountains in the middle of nowhere and be a recluse. And that's what I do now.
Well, it seems like you've lived both of those lives, right? And I mean, it seems like there's a time and a place for each one. So, I mean, I think it's exciting for the fans to see where you're at now, obviously with the new project dropping. Is there anything that you can tell the fans about it? And you mentioned those 4 tracks as well. I didn't want to lose that. Are the 4 tracks that were cut going to be surfacing anywhere, or could that be like a bonus thing?
I asked the label that. I was really pretty disappointed when they pulled them off because they weren't, to me, B songs. They were like A songs. And they said, no, we'll at some point we'll put out a bonus, record or CD with the four tracks. And I'm playing guitar on those. So that's why I was proud of them, because before I got paralyzed, I did the bass, the guitar, the solos. So I hope they come out someday.